In the first session, I'm going to be sharing something about universal values as a foundation for world peace. And Lorna there mentioned the importance of kind of finding or clarifying for herself certain values through her association with Universal Peace Federation. That's very interesting to hear. And certainly it's one of our themes. We see it as the uniting point, as a precursor for peace, for different groups and different traditions and different cultures. This is very important to realize that we have more in common, perhaps, than we imagine at first, and therefore we focus largely on that. I like to begin this first talk with a picture of our world. You'll notice it in the center of our UPF logo, right? So it's very apt in that way. But this picture, of course, it wasn't seen like this until quite late in humankind's history. We could travel outside our atmosphere and into space and look back at the blue planet and see how beautiful it is. And also notice there are no lines or no borders there, like you see on a classroom map, right? No countries in different colors or political affiliations. No, it's just one world. And that means those barriers are not there. Of course, some of them are there in some kind of reality, some, checkpoints and passport borders, this kind of thing. But really, they're in the mind of people. That's where they are, and they can change as well, and we can loosen those borders. We can allow a kind of freer exchange. This is a kind of related photograph, which you might have seen, especially, well, if you've been to this before, you'll have seen, although this is slightly amended. I've got a dry-looking world with three little balls, little blue balls. You see those? Can you guess what that is? The large one is all the surface water of the world, like the salt water, rolled up into one ball. That's how big it would be. All the oceans, all the seas, surprisingly small, isn't it? And the middle one is actually all the fresh water. And most of that is locked up in ice at the north and south polar regions. And then the tiny, if you can make it out, there's a tiny little blue ball, which is the fresh water. That's the lakes and the rivers. It shows what a precious resource and what a kind of delicate balance our world is in, and how we have to take care of it and look after it. And that's also a theme of UPF, because peaceful world is not just a thing that talks about politics or these kind of relationships, but we have to manage our whole world and environment responsibly. So here's our founder. I'll have some quotations through my talks from Father Moon. Here he is talking to an interreligious audience at a special program that he convened back in 1985 called the Assembly of the World's Religions, bringing religious leaders together. And he said there, religions should be concerned with God's will for world salvation more than with the salvation of the individual or the welfare of their own denomination. As far as I know, God is not sectarian. He's not obsessed with minor details of doctrine, which often divide various branches of a religion. We should quickly liberate ourselves from theological conflict, which results from blind attachment to doctrines and rituals, and instead focus on living communication with God. In God's parental heart and his great love, there's no discrimination based on color or nationality. There are no barriers between countries or cultural traditions, between East and West or North and South. Through interreligious dialogue and harmony, we should realize one ideal world of peace. Well, I say yes to that, right? So that is very much his vision, which he embodied and played out during his whole life and the many projects that he started, including, of course, the one we're associated with here today, UPF. And that explains why we're looking at religion in a general way, but also, you will have your own kind of specific take and role on that, and that's very welcome, and it'll make a wonderful contribution to the various activities which we're doing. So everybody is welcome in that respect in UPF. It's a little unique. Can you be a little unique? It's very unique. It's unique, right? So that's the approach. And I'll try to explain the kind of something about the approach of UPF as we go along, but also give you a little insight, which is not necessary if you work with UPF, but I'll try to give you in this particular seminar some insight into Father Moon's own understanding and ideas, even you could call it theology, philosophy, so that you can grasp, something about the man and this couple that are leading this activity, but also you can understand why UPF is what it is and doing what it's doing. Right? So that should come clear. So first of all, there's a respect for religion generally, and to recognize that it has indeed a contribution to make. Now, that's not everybody's opinion today, of course, but it's bringing focus and attention back to this, to rediscover, in a way, the value of the contribution of religion. Sometimes religion does not serve its cause very well, right? It's its own kind of enemy, unfortunately. So we have to look beyond that, and we're looking much more idealistically in this way, but looking for the good points. True religious practice seeks to restore peace and promotes certain things, such as humility in front of God, a power outside of ourselves, promotes respect to parents, fidelity in marriage, loyalty, idea of public service is there. And I'm talking very generally because you'll find this quite universal in the world's religious traditions. Also, personal discipline is very much a part of that. Sacrifice and control of physical desires, recognizing that we have to get ourselves under control, first of all. So that means restraint and patience and forgiveness in relationships and working for better relationships. Loving others as you love yourself, this kind of phrase occurs. And love of neighbors, even of one's enemies. I'll also, if it's okay by you, I'll sprinkle a few quotations from the world's religious traditions. Please don't be offended if yours is not one of them. It's just a representative kind of sample, but let's start with one from Islam, from the Holy Quran. It says there, on this topic, prayer restrains one from shameful and unjust deeds, and remembrance of God is the greatest thing in life, without doubt. Ameen. This is very beautiful, but it's a kind of theme, as you see, which is common to the genuine, true religious traditions of the world. Always in world affairs, whether it's politics or peacemaking, whatever we're doing, there's a human factor, right? It's people who are doing it. So human factor, I would say, comes down to a matter of integrity, and this is where religion can serve a good role to help people become people of integrity, and that's very key. I'm sure you find that in your own life experience. We look for people of integrity. They're the people that we can trust. It's people who, in the end, make the decisions, right? So what kind of people do we want making those decisions? People of personal integrity or people who have none, it's very obvious, isn't it? We find out sometimes too late that a person has really self-centered motives, or they're not really the kind of a good-natured person that we thought they were. So a person's character is shaped by certain things, by their experiences and by their influences, and certainly the kind of values they've been touched by and experienced growing up, through their education, through maybe being helped and shaped by a faith community in their early life as part of, something that their family does or is part of in terms of their local community. And this means that we can, with such people, find unity based on universal values, and we can look to values that are common to the world's great religions, indeed, and philosophies. So, again, I've put some symbols up there, but they're just representative. So, if your religion or faith is not represented there, please don't take any offense by that. But if you have a word with me afterwards, I'll see if I can include it next time, right? So the unification principle, or the ideas which we are sharing here from Father Moon, provides certain things. It's a new expression, I would say, of religious truth for our age. Such truth is in its own way unchanging and as old as the universe, but yet each generation needs some new expression, and we have new challenges in the way that people are educated and aware today. Needs some kind of refreshing of our approach. Otherwise, they get, you see young people drifting away or tending not to value religious traditions or not to see the value in them. So a new expression is very helpful, and this unification principle provides that. You'll see that in the way that we're presenting. Maybe it's kind of new to you or gives you some ideas that you want to adapt and to utilize. It opens the way for a harmonized view of religion and science, which we feel is very important. These should not be seen as contradictory, enemies with each other, but we need a unified world view that harmonizes both of these approaches. It identifies universal values, as we said, which are present in major world faiths, and does something more to reveal the nature of God as a God of, we say, of heart. I'll explain that a little bit later, and identifies clearly the importance of human responsibility. How are we going to make a better world? It's going to require all of us, actually, to play a part. Every person is required and is necessary to do that. It's something that we have to use our integrity and our knowledge and our wisdom and our willingness to exercise our good nature in bringing this about. Also, it provides understanding for tackling real problems, so insights which can be very useful and put into practice. Finally, it does something, and I think this runs through Father Moon's own teaching, through his many, many talks and messages and public speeches which he gave, which amount to a huge number of volumes. I think not all are translated yet, but in the original Korean, it's over 300 volumes. Such a religious founder and leader living in this age means that so much could be recorded and could be on videotape, and it's a wonderful thing that, when we think of some of the major religious founders in history, they never had that opportunity, and so much probably was lost of what they said, right? And only a little got passed on. You look at the words of Jesus, it put together, the ones that we have, and even their scholars will debate whether this is really what he said or not. That's another story. But it'll make just a little pamphlet, that could slip through your letterbox very easily. Right? But what power, what power the words of the Prophet Muhammad, what power the words of Buddha that have been passed on orally or through various traditions. So, those words have such power to change lives and to change history. But I think much was lost in history as well. We have a certain benefit from the age that we live in. I add here a little caveat, I suppose, for this talk in particular. Yes, we're talking about building a peaceful, ideal world, but I'm talking here about an original ideal or potential for human beings. So you may say, oh, well, that sounds very nice, right? But it's much too idealistic. Life isn't like that. Well, I acknowledge it's not. But the unification principle starts this way because it's saying to have an picture of that ideal is very important. It's something to aim for, to understand how we should be. What should an ideal, peaceful world look like? And, what are we aiming to do? So, in a way, it's stirring up those feelings inside of us, which everybody shares, interestingly, and gets stimulated by. So that is, acknowledged. Also, I'm freely referring to, and I've already done that, right? God and religious concepts. Why? Because I'm sharing Father Moon's view and his understanding, and I want to kind of tell it as it is from, the words that he shared and the viewpoint that he held personally. And, finally, I can say I'm not implying any judgment on people who think or choose to live or behave differently to the examples that I give. It's, as you'll see, we'll talk quite a bit about marriage and family, but it's encouraging us to reevaluate this tradition, which sometimes gets lost in a multitude of other variations which society is talking about. So if you catch my drift, it's not to point the finger at anybody, but to go back to something more original and to reevaluate it and to uphold it as something that's really worthwhile and worth revisiting. Are you with me, everybody? Great, you're doing so well, right? I don't think I could sit all day and listen to myself, right? So I'm sympathetic towards you. This is Father Moon's kind of view and understanding of the Creator. Again, you'll sense there's a little kind of move into scientific approach as well, because he studied electrical engineering as a young person, which is interesting, and found that he got a lot of ideas from that about the kind of invisible world and the nature of God. So he's saying that this Creator God that we identify or come to know has both internal character and some kind of external form. Not an external form that we see, but there's something which becomes the external form of everything. That's where it comes from. So the origin of internal character of everything, we can say, and the origin of the external form of everything. Where does it come from? It comes from the Creator. But also, and this is represented by the plus and the minus there in these two kind of complementary halves. There is the origin of the masculine nature of everything and the origin of the feminine nature of everything. It comes from the one same source. That means, in Father Moon's theology and understanding, God is revealed to be both father and mother, or male and female parent, in a state of harmonized oneness, because God is one. And masculine and feminine in this context refer to complementary qualities. A woman has mainly feminine qualities, but also some masculine qualities. And likewise, for a man, has mainly masculine qualities, but also some feminine qualities. Actually, without that, we wouldn't be able to understand each other at all, men and women. And some people say that's already quite difficult, right? But, it would really be difficult if we didn't share something. So these are kind of human qualities and human characteristics, but they are come down as kind of complementary and each beautiful and each important in its own way. and as valuable as each other. And it's this difference which is a source of delight and a source of energy and excitement and beauty and harmony. So without this, as I said, it would be very hard to appreciate the world and others. So we all possess something of this. And the nature of God then God has internal character. That is made up of emotion, intellect, and will, also concepts and laws which operate throughout the universe. These come from somewhere, and they are a certain way. And they are what they are. Some, traditions call this the absoluteness of God, or absolute nature. That means it is a certain way and no other way, right? So this is what we can say. And there's also, I already used this language, which is a little bit new, to talk about an external form as the nature of God. That means original energy, or something that exists prior to energy in the universe, and energy is a manifestation of that. So it's in everything. It's that life force which is there, and which science actually at the moment cannot explain, right? Science actually cannot explain what this life is. We experience it here. We don't know if it exists anywhere else in the entire universe. But what is it? It's a motivation there. There's a purposefulness behind it. Where does that come from then? Father Moon would say, from the Creator, him and herself, right? So at the center of God, he defines something that we call heart. That's using a kind of common word, but in a slightly new and deeper way. What is heart? That's at the very center of the Creator and origin of this universe. Heart is the impulse to experience joy through giving and receiving love. It's the desire to want to do that at all, right? To give and receive love, and through that receive joy. It's the creative impulse. It's something very, very fundamental. And we have something of that ourselves, right? In everything that we do that's creative, and I use creative in a very broad way. Even mathematics is very creative, right? And there's a beauty in that when you see mathematicians looking at, they've been working out a problem and they finally got to the answer, right? Solve the equation that couldn't be solved for years. And they'll look at it and they'll just say, this is beautiful, right? They'll see a beauty that maybe a person like myself doesn't see, right? I can't even read it, but it's another language. But there you go. This is something very creative, and our energies can be put into all kinds of ways, into counseling, into cake making, into, all kinds of things. Gardening. Somebody was telling me they're doing a lot of gardening now, right? Finally got a garden. So a new world opens up in a way. So heart is this source of motivation for creating. And that's in the Creator, and it's in us as well. It's the source then of meaning. We get our meaning in life from this, and it's the core of human nature as well. And when God creates in a pair system. We call it subject and object. Subject is the kind of initiating force. Object is the kind of position which responds. And then, it can be dynamic as well. So subject is initiating, object is responding. And everything that exists, if you just think about it a little moment in the world, exists in these kind of paired relationships, whether it's man and woman, like male and female, whether it's inner and outer, or different kind of combinations are there. So you have a pair system. One example is our cells. We're made of mind and body. There's a pair system right there, right? Our internal nature and our external form. And mind is initiating as the subject, and the body is responding. This gets you to do things and gets you to do the right things. So we have to learn and we have to develop and train that mind and body unity, and that's part of religious discipline, which is a kind of corrective way, because human nature as it's come down to us is maybe not always doing it in the right way. So if we think of two people having a conversation, then at any one time there's a speaker and there's a listener, isn't there? And then it swaps around, at least it should. And the speaker is naturally the subject in this kind of language, and the listener is the object. And when a person who's been listening to you, you stop talking and it's their turn to speak, then it's your turn to listen. Have you ever had the experience that you're talking with somebody and you just start to think, are they listening to me? Because often you will find they don't respond to anything that you say, but it's like they were just waiting for you to finish, and then they carry on with what they were saying. So, I think that happens quite often, actually. I hope I'm not guilty of that, but, I may well be, now watch myself. But, I've noticed that. And then it's not so productive. That give and take relationship or give and receive relationship is not productive. And yet when it's working well, when a person takes on board something you said and then modifies and throws it back to you, so you think, oh yes, yeah, no, I see what you mean. They actually help you refine your idea. And through this productive conversation, then you start to have great ideas emerge. And at the end, you kind of look at each other and said, where did that come from? That's a great idea. We should do that, right? Was it your idea? No, I thought it was your idea, It's a beautiful process. Right? So how to do this properly is something that we have to learn, actually. That's part of peacemaking, right? It's absolutely related to that. That's why I'm looking at these things, but I'm maybe not going to directly tie it in. I'll leave it to you to kind of see the connection here. In peacemaking, you're going to have at any time, speakers and listeners, and you're going to have people who don't want to listen. Right? So a subject-object pair is husband and wife in a marriage, right? So that's, again, very dynamic. In some areas or at some moments, the husband may be subject, but certainly, in this process, sometimes the wife is the subject, and this is her area and expertise and knowledge, and she'll be able to, initiate that conversation and things about the home and the children and what have you. And as a husband, you should listen, right? You should listen, and then you should, digest it and then respond helpfully, right? And then the unity will grow deeper through that, because the purpose of this give and take action, it's producing energy and forces that are necessary for existing, for multiplying, and for acting. And in this case, where it works well is where there's a common purpose. A common purpose. There's a little something in the Christian tradition. It has Jesus saying, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there shall I be. Which I think expresses this. In my name means with a kind of common purpose. And that could apply to any religious tradition. You sit down with an aim to converse and relate together, centering on the things that you both value in common. Your religious tradition, your holy book, the words of your prophet or your founder, or because we both have this in common and treat it as something essential, then our conversation will develop based on that. Are you with me? So this is where it can be very, very helpful, whereas conversations where each person has their own kind of purpose means there are different agendas going on, and that's not good for unity. It's not good for peacemaking, right? So here we can say that energy of God, this external form aspect, is in everything. I've represented it here by little green arrows, right? Just to kind of say there's something at work there. There's some kind of pre-energy at work, or universal prime force. It's encouraging subject and object in those pairs to relate together. That's why we feel to do that. And it moves all these dual characteristics, as we call them, to form a common base for their mutual relationship and mutual benefit. So it encourages unity, and unity is a striving to create something greater. It's like we're better together than we are separate. It's creating something of greater value and more impact. So this is also a foundation for God's eternal existence. And all these relationships, and there are a multitude of relationships, and I would say, if anything, Father Moon's theology is a relational theology. It always comes back to relationships. And this harmonious interaction of subject-object leads to the things that we value. It leads to love and truth and beauty and goodness. These things emerge when it's working well. Are you with me? Wow. Excuse me, I'm going to have a little sip here. Cheers, everybody. So, here we have God who also needs an object to love. I said it's relational theology. So this might be a new concept. God needs an object. This is the motivation behind creation, actually. So God as a subject with heart loves human beings, and we have a heart that can respond to that. And that's a very precious aspect that we've inherited. And we can return beauty. So the response to love is beauty. If you love somebody, they look beautiful to you, right? So husbands, I can say this to you, right? Husbands in the room, if you love your wife more, she'll be more and more beautiful. That's true, right? I think you'll find there's a kind of other way round which you can, work that one, right? So what is beauty, though, to God? Well, beauty is things which you'll find are encouraged and emphasized in the world's religious traditions, such as humility. We talked about that before. Honesty. That's beautiful. Dishonesty isn't beautiful, to be honest, right? Trustworthiness is something beautiful to God. Faithfulness is something beautiful, right? Something precious. You can recognize that in people, and that can help you endear to others as well. And loyalty is something beautiful. Filial piety, this kind of love for parents and respect for elders, this is something beautiful, and it's encouraged in the world's religious traditions. So we see a world of complementary pairs, and this is where people get the most excitement out of, say, ballet, is when the man and the woman dance together, right? Because that's a complementary pair, and they both have their roles, and they both need each other. There's a beautiful photo, I love this one, of the lions. The lioness has been out hunting all day. That's her job, right? And she's come home very tired, but the husband there is just keeping a little watchful eye over her to make sure she can sleep in peace. Within plants, the bottom left-hand corner, plants have a male and female aspect, sometimes in the same plant, the stamen and pistil, but they're still there. It's a complementary, relationship. Sometimes it needs a third party, like a bee or a, moth or something to help, pollinate and help pass this on to the next generation. And even the crash of lightning is something to do with electricity, which is plus and minus, which is a very rudimentary form of masculinity and femininity coming together to create sparks, right? Wow. So lasting foundation for peace and happiness comes as an individual when I'm working to have my mind and body unite well and work together well in a harmonious relationship centered on values that I hold dear. We can say God, according to Father Moon's theology, but if that's uncomfortable for you, then it's fine, because we're very inclusive in UPF, even for people who don't have a religious affiliation. It's fine. So you can talk about centering on higher values or a higher purpose. If you can identify that as something worth living for, then your mind and body need to come together, centering on those higher values and that higher purpose. Are you with me? And that will help to develop yourself as a person of integrity, a person whose body obeys their mind and their mind obeys higher values. This is producing integrity as an individual, right? And that's something we admire. So this is what we have to learn while we're growing up, right? Because we don't have it from the beginning. We have to learn sometimes a hard way to get our mind and body to work together. And in some people, not enough work is put into doing that, right? So we have to think about that. So mind-body unity means a person of integrity whose words match their deeds. We can grow in character and maturity of heart this way, through this interaction. And we can also develop spiritual sensitivity, and even as an individual, we would say, become a dwelling place of God or an embodiment of God. And that is very important, kind of, ultimate goal as an individual, to come to that level of spiritual maturity, or even some people use the word perfection, although that's not in a kind of fixed way. Then, who do we admire in the world? We admire people who have, more than an average amount of integrity, and they're able to show that and display that and live that way. So when I was for my sins, I was a religious education teacher in high school in Greenwich. And the curriculum said, well, we have to talk about certain people. One of those was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., another was Mother Teresa, another was Gandhi, and I think a fourth was Nelson Mandela. And then the kind of list ran out. Who else should we talk about, right? Well, okay. In their own way, these are all ordinary people, aren't they? But, they have an impact beyond just their own life because of the way that they lived and their ideas and the way they put those. And some of these, they're not universally loved by people, but they have made a certain mark. And it's open to anybody to make that kind of mark and that kind of contribution. As an ambassador for peace, you can do that yourself, right? So that means then once, we've developed this kind of individual who has integrity, then the natural thing that majority, not everybody, but the majority of people feel they want to do is to find a partner in life. They want to go to what they conceive of as a next stage. That means to marry, to have a family, to actually bring children into the world, and I can pass this on to them and raise them. And it's something which comes very naturally to a majority of people. And it's a very beautiful and natural thing. So the second kind of foundation for lasting peace and happiness, which brings peace in human society, is the family. This is why we emphasize the family a lot. And that means centering on these higher values or higher purpose, or shorthand, for those who kind of think that way, God, we can say, then husband and wife can unite and find that commonality in terms of shared purpose to unite and develop their own kind of united view of life and raise children accordingly and pass on their love to their children. And that should develop. If a child can learn in that family setting, then they can become and learn the norms for how to behave in society when they leave the family nest, as it were, right? They're going to bring what they've learned and experienced to their multitude of relationships outside with really other brothers and sisters in the world. So the family, from this point of view, is the building block, more than the individual. This is where the kind of model is made that needs to be expanded to the society, the nation, and the world. Are you with me? So UPF makes a strong tie-in between the family and world peace, which is not normally done. But this is the reason why, the importance of family as a foundation foundation for lasting peace and happiness. Now, any being then, according to this kind of explanation, is interdependent. We're in relationships. We don't just exist by ourselves. Therefore, we're created to exist through reciprocal relationships, and we need to work on those and work to perfect those. The process of this, or the kind of what is making this work, is something that we call true love. Love is not talked about nearly as much as it should be, in my opinion, right? It's not fashionable, maybe. I mean, you don't get many politicians talking about love, do you, right? It would seem a bit odd in our current society. But actually, I think we have to talk much more about what I'm calling here true, genuine love. You know, Father Moon probably talked more about love, I think, than any other human being. And he talked about true, genuine love. He called it true love, but that needs a kind of little bit of explanation. What is this love? Because there are many types of love, right? To define it is quite difficult, and he talked, like I said, so broadly and so widely, without any kind of succinct definition. And maybe that's a difficult thing to do, to actually produce a succinct definition of true love, but I've had a go anyway, or other people have had a go on my behalf. This is from the American author Greg Bear. He says, true, genuine love is unconditionally caring about the happiness of another person. I find that quite helpful. There's another that I'm borrowing here from American psychologist Scott Peck. If you come across his book, The Road Less Traveled, also very excellent. He said there, the true, genuine love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. So it has a clear kind of purpose there. And that means sometimes, sometimes you have to be corrective. You can't, just love people. You have to help somebody by correcting them and pointing out, things which they're not doing right. You have to help them in their spiritual growth in that way. This is a summary with the help of AI of all the words of Father Moon, right? I don't know if that's good to do or not, but I was interested by the result. I said he had so many words on this. Well, AI came up with this answer when I said, what's the summary of Father Moon's view of true love? And it said, a deep and selfless love that seeks the well-being and happiness of others above oneself, that is seen as a divine and transformative force that has the power to heal relationships, communities, and the world at large. Wow. Okay. For those of you who had heard this before, this is new, right? So I'm always trying to research and kind of pick up from what people are saying. And, it's an interesting area. We have to talk more about it. We have to get people buzzing about love and exercising love. We have to teach our children what is true love and the right way of having relationships and developing relationships. Am I right? It's so important. So where do we learn this true love that we're talking about? Is it just a kind of idea we've come up with, or some American psychologists? No, it's age old, right? This is a part of our inheritance from the Creator. We learn from our parents, who are our first teachers. And the family, we say, is the school of love. Other people use this expression too. It's a place where the heart is nurtured and the character is developed. It's a primary training ground for all relationships. It's a safe place where you can make mistakes, right, as a young child, and you can be corrected and learn and get a good example and feel these things, where you can't communicate them in words, and you come to know it through experience, and that's what parents are and should be doing. So also we learn it in the family, in relating to brothers and sisters. This is another aspect of love, and from parents and from grandparents as well. So emphasizing family as a kind of three-generational construct. The family then is a school of morality. It's the basis for societal norms and proper conduct in the wider world. Wow. Now we're talking, right? So where do we learn this true love? We learn it as husband and wife, where we see God in our partner, and we are learning all the time, and we're coming to a higher level of unity through that exchange of love and beauty. And the couple then becomes more in the image of the Creator than either one separately, because the Creator is male and female, is father and mother. So the couple is more in the image of God. Are you with me? That makes sense? It harks back to very ancient scriptures, right? Living for each other, the family and the wider world, and it's a model of true love for their children. So, the parents need to be that model, and then the children learn from that by example, It's tough being a parent, isn't it? Because you're an example all the time, right? But that's the wonderful way of passing on. So a strong family then is not just focused on itself, because that's kind of family-level selfishness, which we can't allow. It has to be thinking outside of the family, and that's part of the education given to children. So a strong family has a focus higher than self, an altruistic purpose of service to the community. So, if you have children and they learn that you have become an ambassador for peace, I'm sure they will be very proud of that and gain something. And at least they'll be thinking, in the future, I want to do something like that. I want to contribute to society. I want to do something, beyond the family. So Father Moon talks about it as 4 great loves that are experienced and learnt in the family, and this is why it's important. And we have to get back to this, It's where we learn child's love, siblings' love, spouses' love, and parents' love, these 4 aspects. He said here, this is back in 1970, I forget the date, but it's an early speech. He's saying, in the family there are 4 levels: grandfather and grandmother, father and mother, you and your spouse, and your sons and daughters. The world is the extension of these relationships. Thus, you need to love the people of the world whose ages are similar to the people in your family in the same way you love your family members. So this is kind of passing on. This is why the family is so key. If you've learned properly to love your grandparents and value your grandparents in the family, you see a person of your grandparents' age outside in society, and you should love them the same way. You could say, this is just like my grandmother, just like my grandfather. I treat them with the same respect. So this is the point where learning has to continue and develop out of this school of love. It's the principle of living for others, right? In the Christian tradition, in Luke 17, Jesus says, whoever seeks to gain his life will lose it. A little paradoxically, that means just trying to hang on to your own life in a self-centered way. You'll lose it in the end. What do you get? But whoever loses his life, is ready to make those sacrifices, will preserve it. Do we get similar things in other traditions? In the Holy Quran, do not expect in giving any increase for yourself. Wow. Or in Hinduism, in the Bhagavad Gita, of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed by those who desire no reward is the nature of goodness. Or in Sikhism, what is that love which is based on greed? Where there is greed, the love is false, not true love. We'll talk about false love after lunch, right? You need something to eat before I get into that topic, right? So the third foundation for lasting peace and happiness is a more universal peace that comes then when those people who are on that foundation of individual and family level development, reacting and relating to the natural world, again, based on or centering on higher values and a higher purpose, or their shared understanding of God as the creator and sustainer of life. This is, where it's helpful. And how to create a harmonious relationship between people and the natural world. That means, also, developments in science and technology and in our own kind of area of expertise to develop our career in relationship to kind of managing our environment and producing a world which is, of benefit to others and able to be sustainable for the future. So there's a dominion there through love. We have to love in the correct way and care for the environment. We should seek mutual prosperity and material prosperity for all people. It's where science and technology need to be harnessed for the benefit of all human beings and for the harmonious continuation of the natural world. So we could call this by different names: responsible stewardship or true ownership, or different ideas there. But actually, many of the world's religious traditions are at the forefront of thinking this way and seeking to create such an ideal. I'll end with a quote here. This is from Father Moon. He said in a speech called "Everybody Wants True Love," right? I must go back and read that, I think. 1999. He said, "We are born for the sake of love, live for the sake of love, and finally die for the sake of love. Not only people, but all beings desire true love. This is why human beings, as the highest beings in creation, should embrace and love the masterpieces of God's creation and teach creation how to love. All creation is longing to receive and experience God's love through men and women who have become one with God at the pinnacle of true love. It is a shame that we have not realized this degree of love until now, right?" In terms of relating to the wider world and creation, I'm always intrigued how even 2,000 years ago we had a writer like St. Paul. He was saying and feeling, that the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons and daughters of God. It's like until those people of true love emerge, nature is suffering. It's a very perceptive viewpoint, isn't it, for 2,000 years ago? Yeah, it would be today to come up with that. So that's interesting, and you'll have things from your own tradition, I'm sure. So these make three foundations for peace we've talked about this morning: individual peace, peace in family and society, universal peace. Now, interestingly, for those especially who come from religions of the book, you'll see some interesting parallel there, because, say, back in Genesis 1:28, you have this expression of God's blessing to our first human ancestors: be fruitful and multiply and have dominion over the earth. It's very simple the way it's put. But in a way, this is Father Moon's insight and development of that idea, unpacking that idea so that what we see as these three foundations, we could say the first is becoming fruitful as an individual, right? Bearing fruit, bearing good fruit. And then the second is multiplying, not just multiplying. It means, how do we do it? How do we do it in the right way and in the most meaningful and beautiful way to pass on to future generations, and then having the right dominion and that love over the created world. So this is not a new truth. That's the amazing thing, isn't it, right? It's been in our hands for so many centuries or millennia, and yet somewhere we've still got a lot to learn, I think, right? So that's why there's this unpacking and this new expression of truth in this day, which is coming through this, largely through Father Moon's teaching as well as others, but, certain aspects of that are then giving rise to projects such as UPF, and I hope you caught that from my little exposition today. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me.